Well, again, and welcome to another 12-minute mark. We are now coasting through chapter 9. We have several small stories here tied together. Jesus has just cast a demon out of a boy after coming out off top of the Mount of Transfiguration. And again, coming toward Jerusalem, the hour is coming. He has started to tell them about the crucifixion and the resurrection, the great shift we had when he started to reveal why he was on earth, and starting to become impatient. In our last episode, he said, "Oh, unbelieving generation, how long will I put up with you? How long will I be with you?" That could be taken as his time is coming, or it could also be part of the frustration that they still are in unbelief, speaking of the disciples. And again, we see part of the problem. So in the last episode, many of them were arguing and asking why couldn't they cast the demon out. And then in verse 30 of chapter 9, they left that place and went through Galilee. Jesus did not want anyone to know where they were because he was teaching his disciples. And he said, "The Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and after 3 days he will rise." They didn't understand what he was saying, and they were afraid to ask him about it. They came to Capernaum. When he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you arguing about along the road?" They remained silent because on the way they argued about who was the greatest. Sitting down, Jesus called the 12 to him. "Anyone who wants to be first must be the last and the servant of all," he said. He took a little child in his arms and lifting them up, said, "Whoever welcomes one of these little children welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me not only welcomes me, but the one who sent me." "Teacher," said John, "we saw someone driving out demons in your name. We told them to stop." "Do not stop him," Jesus said, "for no one can do a miracle in my name and the next moment say anything bad about me. Whoever is not against us is for us. Truly I tell you that anyone who offers even a cup of water in my name, because you belong to Christ, will certainly not lose his reward." So here again we have Jesus attempting to take his disciples and get them away from the crowd so that he can teach them. The more Jesus keeps going, the greater the crowds crush all around him, but the more and the more he just longs to have this small group time. This is Jesus' small group. As we've been trying to get into small groups during this time, how important that is. We see how important it is to Jesus. He's doing everything he can. He's gone into cloak and dagger mode just to be able to have time to teach his disciples, because the time is drawing near. And he knows that they have to be equipped to deal with what's about to happen. And he, of course, now explains to them that, in very simple terms, Jesus has spent much of his time teaching in parables, and then they go back in the house, and the disciples ask, "Okay, what the parable mean?" And Jesus will explain. But this is not parabolic language here. He's saying, "I will be handed over, arrested, I will be crucified, and I will rise again." And it tells us not only did they not understand, but it was so outside of what they could accept that they refused to even ask questions about it. Sometimes you hear a hard truth, and this may be true of all of us at times, and there's like a defense mechanism, just not be able to respond to it at all. It's difficult to, it's not in their realm of expectation, and they don't want to bring it up. let's not talk about that. It's difficult. Um, and so they go from there, and again, it's just the 12 from Galilee into Capernaum, and he gets them back, and it's maybe comical, but almost sad. What were you arguing about on the road? It happens all the time. You get the kids in the car, they're going to start fighting. What are you even fighting about? And it's always something silly. And this is a big time argument. And again, for the second time in a few verses, they're quiet. They're not going to talk about the crucifixion and resurrection because they don't understand it. They're not going to bring that up. And this is embarrassing too. We're not going to bring that up. So they're in silence because they know that they know enough that they shouldn't have been arguing about who was the greatest. And they're not talking about Muhammad Ali or boxing or anything. They're comparing themselves to each other. They're figuring out which one is the favorite, who's the pet, who's the right-hand man among the 12 or whatever. And Jesus sets them down and has to then go into this explanation, which again, I don't know if they got it. I don't think we get it most of the time. Anyone who wants to be first must be last. And again, that sounds like a parable, like he's doing parables again. It's a riddle. It's like something off of, Strange, like off of Alice in Wonderland. How in the world, what does this make sense? And but then he really does explain the parable within the statement by saying, and servant of all. He's talking about the priority and the supremacy of servanthood. And one of the places where when we talk about Christian leadership as servant leadership, as the one who will rise up and do what is right, is the one who has the servant heart and the servant hands, the one who will actually serve. Well, that's completely foreign to anything they'd heard. That's, if you've been raised in Christian teaching, you recognize this passage, but that's so counter anything else. That's so radical. It's so backwards to every way the world works. And that's the point. It is backwards to the way the world works. That's what sets the church apart. That's what makes the believer different. That's why leadership in the church is different than leadership at the bank or at the factory or anywhere else. That's why the Christian family organizes itself differently and has a different set of goals involving servanthood. And so he knows that this is different and it's going to be hard for them to take. And so when you're teaching something challenging, you use a visual aid. And he takes a child, a little child, because it's one that he can take up in his arms, and says, okay, welcoming, the idea, which is kind of all encompasses the idea of hospitality, that you would care for, look after the needs for, be compassionate to. Welcoming is a bigger idea than normally we would just think of as if you're welcome or you can come in. You're welcome to come in. It's a big idea. But if you welcome the little child, you welcome me. And not just me, but the Father. And so what he does is he takes the child who has no status. Children typically weren't thought of as cute. In the ancient world, they were adults in waiting. They were burdensome until they were able to contribute. They were seen as for what they could produce, and a child doesn't produce. A child can only accept grace and accept help. A child can't really serve and just be served as a child. And so Jesus uses this radical idea of the one who would take care of the kids, the babysitter, the one who would look after a child in which there is not an immediate reward to this. There's no great status to this. It's the slaves or just a few of the servant girls who take care of the children. And he equates that with the welcoming of of God himself. It's an amazing thing. Still not getting it? John pipes up, "Teacher, we saw someone casting out demons in your name and we had him stop." So amid this teaching, John starts, maybe they're embarrassed or they still don't get it, but he starts tattling on this other group. And Jesus, just teaches him very directly, do not stop them. My end group isn't just you 12, isn't just those who are walking with us. And this is a picture of what the church hopes to become. It might be, Jesus is teaching on, we're not going to faction up. It doesn't matter if that guy was a fisherman like you all or not. He can do my work. Do not stop him. And then again, he uses the illustration of anyone who even offers you a cup of water in my name will not be, because of you being a believer, they will not lose their reward. Again, a slave would get you the cup of water. These are little things. These are little humbling activities. The humility of the child, the humility of service, the humility of the cup of cold water, the anonymity, the unknown person who has no status, who isn't on Jesus's inner circle, who's still doing work through Jesus. All these low status ideas are raised to the idea of this is what work and service looks like in the kingdom. This is what it's all about. And it is completely, radically upside down from what is natural and the way the world works. That's the cost of discipleship that Jesus is really starting to focus on here as he's headed toward the cross, which we'll start to see coming up soon in our more episodes of 12-Minute Mark. God bless.